Hello and welcome to the Gold Goats and Guns podcast for Tuesday, April 18th, 2023. My name is Tom Luongo and we have a lot to talk about. It is episode 139 and I have back one of my recurring favorite guests, Dave Collum. Dave doesn't really need much of an introduction anymore. This is, I think, the third time he's been on the podcast, maybe the fourth.
It's at least three. It's at
least three. So good afternoon, Dave. How are you? How you been? I know it's been so long since we talked when we were last on Tommy's podcast, but it's like everything.
Yeah, a week or whatever. Yeah,
literally a week.
I'm doing fine. I must confess that the more I learn, the less I know. So I've reached a point where I think you and I talked about this during Tommy's podcast, where we both said it at this point, just hands in the air, throw them up, and say I'm just a lost soul now, right?
Sometimes
what I do know is that you should not believe anything at this point. I just don't know how to handle that.
Well, one of the things that I've said recently, and I've come to the conclusion recently, we all know the phrase trust but verify. And, you and I both being scientists.
I used that yesterday.
Yeah. Trust but verify. I've actually updated that. That's now distrust but verify, meaning assume that they're lying to you, but then try to verify that they might not actually be lying to you, because you're more likely to be right if you just distrust everything. And then every once in a while, you're like, oh my God, they actually told us the truth.
Right. I use the general rule that if their lips are moving, they're lying.
Of course.
Yeah.
No. So I think, so you and I, before we started I pushed the record button. The one thing that we agreed that I think we should both talk about, and I think neither of us have really talked very much publicly about, is this Pentagon leak or the Pentagon Papers. To be honest, I don't have a dominant theory at this point as to what's going on. I don't think the leaks themselves are all that interesting. I note a couple of things. One, no one wants to link directly to the pages themselves. These things are toxic. I was speaking to my partner Dexter White about this yesterday. He's like, yeah, you can't even find this stuff on Poll. Like, even Poll thinks it's too radioactive to actually.
That's fascinating. So you get photographs occasionally. I've seen photographs, but they're kind of worthless. Mm-hmm. I was going to ask you to do me a big one and yours a big one, and summarize the key observations, because I don't think they're that fascinating to the extent that I think they're telling us what McGregor's been telling us all along.
Mm-hmm. Now, I think
that everything's screwed up.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing, and I think that it's more the response to them that is the interesting part. Right.
So tell me about that.
This is the way I've looked at it from the beginning. Right. Whenever something like this happens, the first thing, I've gotten to the point now, Dave, or I refuse to abreact in real time unless something is really discontinuous. Right. It's really discontinuous, and it's something that I know that I already have a unique take on, and that is going to be necessary for me to react to in real time. Most of the time now, I'm just like, okay, let's sit back. Let's let this fester for a week and see how everybody scuttles around and see what the cockroaches do. See which cockroaches respond in which way.
And the crowdsourcing is incredibly valuable, because there'll be guys like this Budweiser story, and you find out that the CEO of Budweiser is CIA, and you go,
right, exactly.
You go, okay, well, apparently that plot just thickened, but you don't quite know what to do with that, and so you just sit back and collect.
You keep collecting some data. So the more I think about this, I go back to that insane press conference that John Kirby gave, the Defense Department spokesperson,
where he said they're not true and don't believe them, and don't say anything.
And more importantly, that the media, the kept media, the ones that they've already vetted, that they only allow the good ones in the room in the first place, then sat there going, how can we help you do damage control? Right. And I think that's your big tell.
Right.
Okay. Right. And your big tell here is that the leaks were real, but they didn't tell us that anybody, this is the thing. I started working on a blog post this morning, and part of the reason Dave pings me at we're supposed to record at 2:00, and at 1:59, like, where's the link? I'm like, oh shit, I forgot all about this. Right. Because I was working on this post. So the post will be out probably before this podcast is published. But one of the things I noted this morning I was read an article by Kit Knightley over at Off Guardian, and I'll have a link to it in the show notes and a link to the article that I riffed off of it. And Kit went through and said, here's my basic heuristic as to whether a leak is real or not. And he lists 5 things, and they're all perfectly reasonable and valid and smart. It's one of my heuristics. And one of the big ones is that, did they tell you anything you didn't already really know?
Right.
Okay, so all they did was confirm for us that which we already knew. But then, if that's the case, then why is Kirby looking like deer in the headlights? Oh my God, you can't let this stuff get out into the public thing. This guy's not that good an actor, right? So
you think he was panicking?
What's that?
You think he was panicking then?
That was absolutely. I think he was panicking. Okay. I think that was a sphincter, clenching moment on their part, and they were in pure panic mode. I just don't see this guy as I don't see anybody in the Biden administration as 12D chess playing game players here. I play a lot of games against a lot of really devious people, and these people.
Yeah, I think they're not even up for checkers. So yeah.
Exactly.
Do you think the 21-year-old kid leaked anything? Do you think?
Do you think someone?
Someone could have slipped it to him without telling him what it was, and he did something stupid.
Okay, here's one for you. This kid is straight out of alt-right central casting for shit libs. He is the perfect. And whether they made him up to be this or they didn't, again, we can go down the rabbit holes here, right? We can speculate all kinds of things. But what they told us was that he's straight out of alt-right central casting, including trying to use the word gun enthusiast as some kind of pejorative, which I find hilarious. So let me ask you this basic question. If this kid is such a patriot that he would be willing to torch his military career, to take photographs of these things, stick them in his back pocket, take photographs of them, because I've seen some photographs, and clearly these documents were folded in quarters.
But the photographs suck.
Yeah, of course they always
suck.
But
if you wanted to really leak it, I could do better with my iPhone and cam scanner.
I agree. Now, that's a point in, say, Kit's favor. But on the other side of it, here's one to think about. What if this kid is that guy? And I've been arguing for a long time now. And this is not a definitive theory on my part. I'm going to throw this out there and let people chew on it. If this thing is chum, who's the chum? Who's getting chummed here, right? Well, who's the shark getting chummed? So I think to myself, well, if this kid's really a patriot and really, dedicated to, his role as a member of the U.S. military, has it really that far beyond the pale to think that some colonel or some lieutenant colonel who he respects, or even some low-ranking general who's looking at this situation going, this is insane. They're trying to meme us into war, which we're not ready, which we don't want to fight. And, this is now nuclear war toe-to-toe with the Ruskies and the Chinese, to quote Slim Pickens. In my mind, it's not hard for a respected elder within the rank to say, look, you're going to leak this. You're going to be the patsy. You're going to lean in and take one for the team, because this is how we're going to stop. Because their reaction to this is going to be so over the top that we're going to be able to slow down this march towards war. I can see that as a reasonable scenario, and people like Kirby and the rest of them freaking out about this. And then and we're going to paint you as an alt-right straight from central casting in order to make you look bad. I can see it. And he does 6 months in Leavenworth, and then they let him out. And
okay. So if it's 6 months, then that's okay. If it's 20 years, that's a lot.
Let's put it this way. Right. But what if they convict him for 20 years, and then 6 months from now, he's let out silently. And then we all have to trace the thing down. You know what I mean? And who the hell has time for this?
I know.
So, what's important here is to continue to think in terms of what the downstream effects of this thing are. Because, Martin Armstrong put out the other day, he's like, the Pentagon Papers dropped exactly when they should have dropped. If this thing was reaching this narrative of taking us to war, was reaching a crescendo, right? That somebody would look at this moment in time and go, okay, this is beyond the pale. This is too much. We can make like we want to go to war in order to get defense appropriations up, and the MIC loves this stuff and everything else. But dude, as far as I'm concerned, I can't even begin to believe that the military industrial contractors would risk being exposed having their weapon systems exposed is inferior. Like,
Right.
we have done so many things over the years to avoid conflicts where we've actually used technology, military technology, that we didn't want to send a signal to the Russians and the Chinese. And the Russians and the Chinese at this point are like, really? Bring it. Because we're not fucking around. We're not playing games anymore. If you cross these lines, at some point, we're gonna, effectively FAFO, right? You want to FAFO? Here, let's go, baby. Because this is existential. This is an existential problem. So I look at this and I say to myself, there's no way that the military and or the military industrial complex, the contractors, are going to want to be exposed. Right?
Okay.
So they have an incentive to stop this from happening.
Got it.
That to me screams this leak isn't fake, but it's also done in such a way as to have plausible deniability, be part of the disinformation campaign, the whole rest of it, and signal that there's much more out there to those in the know, that there is disagreement at the top of the U.S. political structure. And
I've articulated it slightly differently. So I'll give you, I can give you almost verbatim a couple of things that I've said in podcasts, which I think are consistent, but I'm not sure I had motives totally aligned. And that is what I've described it as, is it looked to me like the start of the end of the war. And that it would be one of these things where, by leaking, you turn the story into the leak, just like you turn the COVID pandemic into the leak.
Mm-hmm.
And then you say, oh my God, this is horrifying. We're pulling out. And then you blame Ukraine for not being a hold-up at the end of the bargain when we had gotten them so close to victory, and now we had to pull out. So to me, it seemed like it was leaked to give us an excuse to get out of a losing situation. So that is almost identical, I think, to what you said. I didn't have an opinion on sort of humiliation, showing our weapons are inferior, things like that. And then you get this goofy stuff like Manchin going over there. And someone called it Dancing with the Stars, but I thought we were way past, photo ops with Zelensky. In fact, I think people were probably saying, holy shit, that photo of me with Zelensky is getting embarrassing. And all of a sudden Manchin goes over there and does this photo op. He looked uncomfortable to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did have I guess the shared view that this is an end to the war.
Well, and this is here's the problem. And I hope you're right. Okay. But I'm going to throw something else out here. Remember, I don't believe that Davos, what I call Davos, European old colonialists,
right,
and U.S. British neoconservatives are the same faction. I think they have the same ultimate shared goals, which is destroy the Russians and the Chinese. But one of them wants to be in charge, but both of them want to be in charge, and they have a very radical opinions or radical differences as to what the world they want to rule over looks like. And that is the thing. And I personally, I can't unsee this the more I think about it, which is that Davos put freaking Biden in power. And then the whole Biden administration is stabbed with all of these warmed over second string old freaking bad
second string
neocons. We don't get the good ones. We don't get the Condoleezza Rices and Trump. No, you know who we get? We get Jake Sullivan, Anthony Blinken, and Victoria Nuland. These people are morons. They are, and if nothing else, they're also deeply tied to, in Blinken's case, tied to Clinton, the Clinton wing of the So, and then
they're scratch and dent neocons.
Yeah, scratch and dent neocons. That's a great way. The cash for clunkers neocons, even better, right?
That's right.
That's right. Obama put them in place because that's really who's running policy. So think about it. So when you think of it in these terms, like these people were put in power. And from the moment the Biden administration started, it's been anti-diplomacy the entire time, all the way down the line. There has been not one shred of diplomacy.
No effort. None
whatsoever. And so we don't even have diplomats in stabbing I don't even know if we filled all the diplomat positions within the State Department. We're 2 years into this guy's presidency, or a year and a half into this guy's presidency. So 2 years into this guy's presidency. So like you think that through, and you go back to my argument that these people are vandals, and that if they were put in charge by somebody and then given free reign to, implement the foreign policy of their worst fever dreams, going back 30, 40, 50 years to the Wolfowitz era and the Brzezinski era and everything else, like at the end of the day, who's being served here by this policy? And so this is where I have this real fundamental problem with the simplistic narrative of, oh, well, it's the United States fears the loss of potency on the world stage and all of this. These are all left-wing talking points that are all bullshit as far as I'm concerned. It's far deeper than that. I think the neocons worry about this, but I do not believe for any in any way that it's a monolith in that respect. I think that there's
right.
I can't buy that, and because it doesn't track with what we know of reality. And so this all happens at the same time that Macron and von der Leyen go to China and play good cop, bad cop with the EU.
Right.
And then Baerbock tries to does her best Blinken impersonation when she goes to Beijing, dressing the Chinese down in Beijing the same way that Blinken dressed down the Chinese in Anchorage 6 days after the friggin' Biden administration took office. Like, this is clearly trying to get the Russians and the Chinese prepped for some kind of apocalyptic event, or get them at least into that mode and get them on a hair trigger. Now, who's served by this? And do you think our real military strategists don't see this?
And so what's always struck me, and I've said it a gazillion times, is that with Biden so compromised in both Ukraine, China, and heaven knows how many other places.
Right.
When he does something remarkably stupid looking, you have no idea who told him to do it. None whatsoever. None.
Exactly. Very, very.
So the idea of pushing, I even had this passing thought that I've blamed NATO for starting this war, really, and certainly propagating the war. But I even had this passing thought, however, to contradict that model, is that maybe Putin and China said, now's the time to make the move, to reformulate the alliances that have been simmering on the back burner. And therefore, if you go into Ukraine, we will do you're with us or you're against us mode.
Yep.
And all of a sudden you get the Saudis shaking their hands, you get the Indians shaking their hands, you get Macron not being the best ally, you piss off Germany blowing up their pipeline, and all of a sudden the global alliances shift massively. So it reminds me, I describe it's not unlike, I use a metaphor, the screen pass, where someone shows Blitz and you call an audible at the line and you get a screen pass, which describes January 6th.
Mm-hmm.
So the Democrats saw Blitz, almost literally, and passed and said, let them run in. And they threw the ball right over their heads, and they arrested a bunch of guys, and they embarrassed the Republicans. And I am appalled by the fact that no Republicans have stood up for the January 6th victims. I listened to Rob Reiner talk about how the January 6th was about guys showing up with weapons looking to kill lots of people. And I go, what universe is he from? Right. I mean, it's just surreal. So back to Ukraine. So it could be another screen pass where Putin saw Blitz and said, okay, let's do the shift to the world order. Now.
No, that's a very astute observation. It's not too far off from what I think as well. I've been kind of saying similar things in different ways, but I think that's a very good way of putting it. from the moment he moved into Ukraine, I never bought the neocon party line for a minute that he was trying to do a strategic decapitation of Ukraine. I think it was
there was no evidence of that. There was no evidence.
If anything, it was a stretch goal, right? It's a kind of classic in Kickstarter terms. It's a stretch goal. Hey, our goal is, taking back the Donbass, but if we can decapitate them through a surgical strike on Ukraine, and we'll see how, we'll see if NATO is prepared for that. Cool. If we get it, then we get extra, right? And if not, well, then we back off and we do our thing, and then we turn the whole thing into a big war of attrition. And
so I don't think Russia was looking for the war to become as big a war as it became. I think Russia thought they could do a hit and run, and that NATO would quickly say, "Oh, never mind. Let's get to the table. Let's negotiate." So I think the Russians' grossest miscalculation was that somehow that forces going into Ukraine would cause NATO to rethink their policy. And I think NATO said, "Oh no, we're not backing down a bit." And so then I think Putin said, "Okay, you've made this a real war, so now we're gonna play it tough."
So now we're gonna now this brings up analysis from people like I've read that there are various people on Substack, and one of whom is I'll give a shout out to him, because I think he's actually quite bright, even if I don't agree with him all the time, or I don't even trust him all the time. There's a guy by the name of Big Surge on Substack.
Oh, I see Big Surge occasionally come across.
Yeah, no, he's actually quite good. He's actually quite good.
I find his writing a little convoluted, although it could just be I don't understand.
That's
right?
Possible.
I mean, it might not be his fault. It might be my fault, but I find it possible. A tough read.
He's always seemed very, very cogent to me. The 2 or 3 articles of his that I've read.
The other guy to watch is Kanakoa the Great. I have no idea who he is. I'm not even sure he's I'm not even sure he's a single guy. He's one of these guys who's so prolific. You go, this looks like a brain stem here. This looks like a group. This looks like some sort of ops, some ops. Just like the COVID guy. Come on, the skeptic. What's his name? Something skeptic.
Oh, I don't know.
Who writes about COVID? Who's just prolific.
Yeah, no, it can't. At a certain point, there's 47 Tyler Durdens over a zero hedge, right? So,
that's right,
or more.
That's right.
But the thing the point that Big Surge made a couple of months ago was that was that the Russians realized, to your point, that this now is a real war. So now the old the organization that they had in these battalion tactical groups were not, they were not the right unit structure to fight this war. They had basically, in being a gamer, and the gamers in the audience will know exactly what I'm talking about, these were glass cannons, meaning they have the ability to put a lot of firepower out, but they can take no damage in return. So they were infantry light artillery groups, and that rank rings very true. And that since the reorganization of the Russian military back in August, that they've been now going to a much more infantry heavy, classical, full battalion support group, military structure. And that's taken time to fill out and get trained.
Now, did they build the Wagner group, or was the Wagner group already assembled? They called them to arms. Do you know which it is?
I can't speak to, because I haven't really followed it that closely.
Oh, the Wagner group looks like the guys who are doing the most damage. I think that. And so then the question is, were they just not being exploited? And I don't know, but they came in the second half, as they say, right? These guys came off the bench.
Yep.
And
started doing work.
Well,
once they knew what they were dealing with, which was that, like Mariupol, Bakhmut is that linchpin to, particular areas in Ukraine, from a logistics perspective. And
so then the other funny thing is that so the leak from the Pentagon matches well with McGregor's analysis of the war, which really must be based on leaks from the Pentagon. And so, I think they share a common source. Mm-hmm. And as a consequence, the stats are coming in looking quite similar and stuff like that. McGregor was called out as being completely wrong for months and months and months.
Well, the other point, and Big Surge was also somebody who did a review of the Pentagon leaks. And one of the things that he pointed out was that, oh God, I hope I don't like screw this up and I misremember this now because it was right in my head, which is, that what's the really big embarrassing point was that it clearly shows that the United States Department of Defense or the State Department, whomever is making these decisions, is taking information either from bad crowdsourcing sources and verbatim taking whatever the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense gives them and then using that to formulate strategy and policy. And if that's the case,
literally
that's the real embarrassing part of this.
They were taking shit right off the internet. This is almost Fauci Burks like.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Just taking crap right off the internet and taking the Ukrainian stats at face value and not formulating their own stats.
So for, as we're sitting here on the verge of World War III with an 800 and something 40 million, however many $1 billion defense budget, you mean to tell me we can't spare a couple $1 million for some spies on the ground to actually do some actual honest to God, channel checking about what's actually happening with the Ukrainian military? I mean, we can't afford a couple of military versions of Wall Street analysts to check the channel. Are you kidding?
I guess it depends on whose team Biden's on.
Bingo. Right. Thank you. Now you're living in my world, Dave.
The other thing is that, when I wrote about this last December, when I discovered that Zelensky's patron, the Ukrainian oligarch who provided Zelensky with all his support as the CEO of Burisma, I go, where have I heard that before? Burisma. That's such a familiar company. Where have I heard that before?
Exactly.
So this really, but the problem is that it makes it impossible to analyze rationally because you can't even take at face value the actions of the administration.
No, it's exactly the point. And I think that this is why a while ago, I started to try, I remember being people like Kit Knightley and Whitney Webb and others, and I'm calling them all out in my article, so I don't even care at this point, and saying, okay, here's some facts. But I've done the same thing to Moon of Alabama, I've done the same thing to Pepe Escobar, I've done the same thing to everybody. I don't care. Like, at some point, facts are fungible in the world of a low information space. Well, low information quality space, right? We have an information space that's very wide, very deep, and we have multiple overlapping disinformation psyops happening all the time. Just like you and I talked about this at the beginning of the podcast, like, don't even know what's going on anymore. Right. So if that's the case, then you can't do that. You can't use that as your heuristic. You can't use that as your heuristic. You have to now start going to incentives and the stated goals of the particular groups and how their actions jibe with the incentive structure of the factions you can identify. And if you're unwilling to identify all of the factions that are actually at the table, then your analysis will eventually be revealed to be wanting. And that's the thing that I think we have to constantly keep in our heads, which is that the game board's constantly shifting. Why? Simply because everybody's bailiwick is under existential threat. As I pointed out earlier, like the MIC and the military, they have real fears, right?
So that gets to kind of a question: how at risk? Right now, this is a controlled burn, right? Mm-hmm. It's not what we thought it was. Well, not what the average person watching MSNBC thought it was, but it was a controlled burn where there really was not yet evidence that someone could do something really stupid, but it was getting progressively closer to someone doing something really stupid. Where are we at now, in your opinion? Are we at risk of great stupidity, or is it winding down?
We're at the risk of great stupidity, because if we allow, like, everybody who has these power fantasies, right, of whatever it is that their goal is. In this case, so let's talk about the factions that want global domination. Like, how do you expect them to respond if their plans start to fall apart? If opposition to their plans start coming from unexpected quarters, or from quarters that, they don't have any control over. Remember, we're dealing with people who are absolutely obsessed with having absolute control over everything. The information space, your ability to procreate, spend money, yada, yada, yada. Like this is who we're dealing with, right? Neocons are willing to, put you in prison for looking at them sideways for trying to stop us from, going to war with China. The Davos will unperson you in a heartbeat for stating something that is against, their goal. So
right.
Why would you think that they wouldn't take us to maximum stupidity? Because again, now start thinking about the kinds of personalities that you're dealing with. These people.
Well, it could be a situation where Ukraine really is just a skirmish,
right?
And it's like a set of downs, and there's times where you say, okay, let's punt, and so
I hope.
Well, but it depends on whether they think this is do or die or just a set of downs.
Yeah, but you listen to the rhetoric coming out of them. They've all said, even the European leadership has said the same thing over and over and over again. So they say, on the one hand, you say, oh, well, we can't, we should start the negotiation process, the peace process. But at the same time, well, we can't give Russia an inch, because then we validate that you can take territory by force. So you have
did you see Medvedev's tweet yesterday? I think it was yesterday.
Which one?
Medvedev put a tweet and said something Ukraine would not exist. And he opened up with that. I can't remember the rest of it.
Oh yeah, I think I did see that.
No,
I don't.
There was something very strange about the tweet. It was about 250 words, and it wasn't a screen grab.
Right. Well, I expected things like long tweets now which I haven't been able to figure out how I turn them on, even though I pay Elon Musk $4 a month.
Because I'm sitting there going, wait a minute, I'm able to grab this text and copy and paste it. This is not a screen grab. Yeah. How is Medvedev dropping this big, huge wad of text?
Right.
Is that the long tweet?
Yeah, there's a thing called a long tweet now, and I haven't quite figured out how to use them. But I've seen other people do them, and I get jealous whenever I get like, oh my god, I get that back down to 280 characters. This sucks. And
okay, I'm copywriting right here. I'm declaring it the phrase "long of the night of the long tweets."
Excellent. I think that's the title for the podcast, actually.
Night of the long tweets. I just thought of that as you explained it. I didn't hide it.
Excellent.
I'm typing this down, but you're welcome to take it.
I'll use it for the title of the podcast. So it'll, and make sure that Dave gets credit. I'll put it in the show notes.
I spend most of my time trying to collect great ways to insult people. Right. It's a valuable thing. I just, I don't know, whatever. Everything's fucked up. For all I know, the Medvedev tweet was created by Chat GTP anyways, GPT or Chat whatever the hell T.
So
are we in danger? You think we're in danger then?
I am very worried about this. And okay. I'm worried about it because, part of what's also very clear here is that they're just trying to get Ukraine to hold out for as long as possible. We can't let Russia win is still on their lips. I think that, the idea is, let's see if we can.
I think that's game over, though. I think Russia, they are going to win.
I think the Russians have to push at some point, and I don't know that they have the ability to do this. And this is, again, I'm just being very Missouri about this. Show me. The Russians haven't showed me that they can do this yet. I think me personally, I kind of almost hope they're capable of doing it, because then that would end any work. It would end so many things, right, that we don't know. It would, and it would also probably actually stem the loss of life, which is ultimately.
That's right. Absolutely. That's right. Absolutely. That's right.
Break the line open, rip the Band-Aid off. This thing is over. Either NATO puts up or shut up.
Kill some more Nazis, right? Kill some more Nazis, right? I'm okay with that. I can handle it.
So I don't know. I mean, thinking in those terms, like how much longer does NATO need behind the scenes to keep, because that's again to get the material in position to be able to then credibly fight the Russians, in Ukraine. And it's a race, as always with these things.
I get the feeling that that we are not even close to getting sort of militarily ready to battle Russia and Ukraine. I get the, again, I'm trying to remember who it is that says it, but they say if you look at the time it takes for us to make our fancy weapons now, it's a long time. We are not putting out a bomber a day like in World War II or anything like that. We're slow. Right. We can put out 30 Abrams tanks in a year, and they can take them out in 2 minutes.
Well, and then the question is somebody sandbagging our production statistics? Like, again, in this information space, I just don't believe anything, right? Because I want to believe that I'm getting good information out there, but at the same time, too many people are acting like, oh no, we are going to fight the Russians and we're going to beat them. And it could be delusion, and it could be the power of the echo chamber of Washington, D.C. and the think tanks on K Street. And it could also be true. And that's what scares me. That's what keeps me up at night. That's what keeps me wondering what's going on here. So again, I know what I want to believe, right? And I know what I'm willing to believe.
So do you put any credence on arguments about how Ukraine and crazy shit like this is a way of providing us an escape route on a collapsing monetary and economic system, and be able to say, see, it's not our fault, it's their fault, that sort of thing? Those arguments are made all the time. I think that's
the very valid thing. And this is, again, gets back to my argument about Davos. Davos wants to destroy the United States bodily and spiritually and economically and politically and institutionally and culturally. They're doing this on purpose, because if they do, there can be no argument. There can be nothing left of the world of classical liberalism. This is an ideological fight between classical liberalism and the private formation of capital versus Marxism, for lack of a better term, and the public.
So they call a liberal world order.
And they call it a liberal world order, right? And you do this by getting the United States to bankrupt itself, fighting 2 wars against nuclear powers it can't win, that are wars of logistics that we can't fight without power, without help. How are we going to fight in Ukraine without the Europeans all giving us their full help? And now the Europeans are all saying that we need to decouple from the United States and not be so reliant on them, which, by the way, has been Emmanuel Macron's raison d'etre since he ran for public office the first time, which is, I want a grand army of Europe. He campaigned on a European army and doing away with NATO. It's always been their goal to roll all of the power of the United States up into the post-Bretton Woods institutional order of.
So I have another problem.
The World Bank and the IMF.
I find myself asking, this is a standard habit of mine, where I ask seemingly stupid questions for which I get seemingly stupider answers out of people who ought to know better. Mm-hmm. And I never know whether I'm understand. But for example, I one time asked, name a country that inflated its way out of debt without a default at the end somehow. And I got the most incredibly bad list of examples from some prominent people, where I could have say, no, that's not valid. Then someone would say Argentina. I go, they defaulted 6 times. I don't think so. And they'd say Weimar Germany. I go, that didn't get them out of anything. That caused World War II. Right. And then up comes Canada, and it turns out if you look at Canada, it's not about inflation. There wasn't much inflation, but in the 90s, they kind of got up to their S and they kind of blocked and tackled their way out with a lot of resource sales and things like that. Mm-hmm. The favorite that comes up is the U.S. in post-war the post-war US, when real rates were super negative, and they say we inflated our way out, but I look and I go, yeah, but we also control something like 80% of the world's GDP. So I'm just not sure how much credit you can give to negative interest rates when you own the entire world.
Right.
And so I get these. And then the one I've asked recently that I didn't like the answers I got from then either was why do we need a reserve currency?
Mm.
And I don't have a good answer to that, because I go, well, if you sell me oil, I sell you oil, and you pay me in Argentinian pesos, I can then turn around and convert that to anything I want at any point.
Mm-hmm.
And it's instantaneous and it's very efficient. And so this idea that you have to have a currency where people have these huge stockpiles of dollars, I don't understand the model. Do you? Because I don't.
I've always subscribed. I subscribe to Riffing's paradox, right?
Right.
Right.
But that at least is part of the assumed world. That's at least part of the reserve currency model.
Yeah,
Griffin's paradox.
Yeah, I agree. And the argument is, the people who are arguing for that are the ones that who have the first access to those dollars to use them around the world for the purposes of trading something for nothing, or nothing for something.
So to me, what the idea of a reserve currency, the dollar being the reserve currency, really is not about a reserve currency. It's about alliances.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost a euphemism for an alliance. So when someone says we don't support dollars as a reserve currency, we're saying we're not aligning with the US. Mm-hmm. And I think the reserve currency is not the big story there. It's the alliances there. The reserve currency is essentially. So when they talk about the petrodollar, I go, but it's not about petrodollar. It's about petro.
Right.
It's petro.
It's interesting that I got into a little bit of hot water on Twitter this morning when I reacted badly to Mike Shedlock's latest article about going over Christine Lagarde's speech, and just bringing it up as you were talking. Lagarde kept talking in that speech. And I dismissed all of my.
Were you the one who said that she's making sense?
No, he was the one who said, he was the one who was saying she was making sense. And I'm like, yeah, only because I forgot to mention to everybody that the conditions of the global economy today were created by her and all of her cronies in order to get things to this state so that they can move to the next state. Oh, but let's not talk about that. Give me a break. Give me a fucking break. And I was really angry with Mike for saying that, but he just literally just before we got on, he finally responded to me, and I'm like, I don't care. You went crazy during COVID. I've literally not much to say to you anymore. But what it was interesting is in that speech, it's not about Mike Shedlock now. It's about back to Christine Lagarde, which she's talking about the dollar and the euro being reserve currencies. Well, notice what you just said, Dave, which is very interesting, which is that, well, if they're both reserve currencies, then isn't the euro in competition with the dollar, and isn't the alliance between Europe and the United States breaking? Isn't that what I've been saying all along?
No, it is. You have been. In fact, you've been discussing using monetary policy to destroy Europe all along.
I've been doing that because Europe made the move to destroy the United States and our monetary policy. As a matter of fact, when you do the analysis about LIBOR versus SOFR, it's very clear that Europe always had control over the value of our dollar. So maybe the argument about the global reserve currency is really about maintaining control over who prices the global reserve currency, and who's the one still arguing that the United States should maintain it. Well, the warmongering neocons, because that's how they've wanted to enact their power fantasies to kill all the Russian Jews and all the Chinese, and the Europeans who want their colonies back, using the cheap dollars through control over the Federal Reserve monetary policy to control the price of offshore dollars and allow for continued hyper leverage of those dollars to buy the world. buy the world back from the colonies who had the nerve to control 80% of the world's GDP after World War II, when they took all of their money and put it in our banks to finance us fighting the Russians.
So, by the way, is that 80% number correct? Because I've been
have no idea.
citing
I'm just citing what you said earlier. I'm just picking
I
up the
have to
thread
look.
of the conversation.
I have to look that up because I have to make sure. But it was a huge.
It was a significant amount. Even if it was 55% of global GDP, it's still
well, but it has to be more because we destroyed the rest of the global GDP.
Right.
I actually did a poll the other day. This is one of those awkward question polls or something where I said, what was the book value of the world in the year of our Lord 0, at the time of Christ, and in $2023. And it's very difficult to know, but you say, there were some fairly majestic buildings and there were dwellings and mud huts. And we know how valuable they are now. So there's various things, there's gold, there's various things that you can include. You don't know how to price real estate. That gets a little tricky. But I did a poll to sort of get people's opinions, and some people guessed $1 million. I go, I don't think so. I think if you tried to build a tiny fraction of a building in Rome, you would have not been able to.
I answered you on that poll, by the way, and I said $100 billion.
Right, and that might be underestimated. So I had 100 billion in my skull too, although I wasn't sure. Turns out that the current estimated global book value is in the ballpark of about $1 trillion, not $1 trillion, quadrillion.
Right.
And therefore 100 billion times 10 to $1 trillion times. So it's a 10,000-fold gain in wealth. And it turns out that if you actually look at the annualized growth in the wealth of the world over those 2 millennia, it's not very good. and
it's like 1%. It's like 1%.
It's actually less. It's more like 0.2 or 0.3.
I was going to say, I remember Gary North used to talk about this all the time. There's a question, the uncomfortable question he posited.
Is he still alive? Is he still alive?
No, he died I think he died a couple of years ago now, unfortunately. So, it
turns out Adam Smith did the same math. I was so disappointed because they go, he beat me by 250 years. He actually described it as that if the worth of the world grew from the time of Christ, which I'd done this calculation already, and he said something like that it would be worth something like 100 million. He described it as an orb of gold 100 million times the size of the moon or something. And I'm thinking an orb of gold is not how I would have put it, probably. But I realized he had already done that math. And so the conclusion is very straightforward. You create wealth pretty much at the same rate that you consume and destroy it.
And the interesting part about it, and what North used to say, and again, he posited this as an academic question, and for the next generation of Austro-libertarians to try and answer, which was that he said the rough estimate was that up until about the 1850s or early 1800s, it was about 1% a year in real terms, like compounding wealth of the planet, about 1%. And then sometime around the early 19th century, it doubled to 2%. And he was like, I think even if you don't agree with the 1% and 2%, it did double, right? And so now the question is, that was the question he always posited to everybody.
I can agree with that.
The question he always posited to all of us and to effectively his students, of which I am one, was why? He's like, and I don't have a good answer for it. And I have a good answer for everything.
Why did it double?
Why did it double? And it's a very interesting question.
Fossil fuels.
I think it's a combination that he even went through this. He said, it's not just fossil fuels, and it's not just, because he went through the numbers. He did it. He's like, it's not fossil fuels, but it is part of it.
I'm not sure. The fossil fuels are compounded. I mean, you get a lot out of a barrel of oil.
Well, but I think the point that North was making, the best answer he had was that, and he said, and it's not even just, sound money, because we did have sound money from the early 19th century up until the formation of the Federal Reserve, for the most part. The international gold standard ran for almost 100 years. And as Walter Block used to put it, that's an anomaly. We've always had crappy credit-based paper money and inflation and coin clipping and all this stuff going on for centuries. And then we finally had a an international standard where we had, a halfway decent money and the world just exploded. I think it was a mixture of that and private property rights and
private property rights for a huge part of the success of the United States, right?
And
great book on that is Fernando de Soto's The Mystery of Capital.
Mm-hmm.
I just did the math. 1% from the time of Christ would compound at 500 million times, and I just don't think
500
million times. Wow. And my estimate was that it compounded at about 10,000.
Right.
If you accept the 100 billion,
sure,
becoming a quadrillion.
Right. Well, so is it 100? Was it 100 billion, or was it 100 million, or even then it doesn't matter. Like at a certain point, you say, I don't know what the real number is, but let's just, even if we only assume we're only 1% in, let's just assume 1%.
Yeah. Right.
Because it's a nice number to work with, right? This is where I get really, really angry with any fucking status, to be honest with you. Because, dude, what you're saying is that I have to give over 70% of that 1% that I actually scrape out against the universe every year, and I got to give that over to my fucking government. I got to give it over to some bureaucrat sitting in a room in the county office building who doing nothing all day, or this person or that person, and that's the best I can fucking hope for. What are you?
The other thing that it gets at, though, is this idea that we all are going to be able 8% a year,
right?
And that's what that shows you is over time there could be nothing more preposterous than that.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore you say, okay, so, well, what's going to happen? You say, well, for starters, let's just pretend. Here's how to think about it. If we stopped putting energy into the system, which is why I answered fossil fuels, sure. We stopped putting enthalpy into the system to get rid of that whole entropy problem, which is constantly in play. Within 25 years, the book value of the world would be pretty much zero. Mm-hmm. Within 25 years.
Right.
Everything would, because for one thing, we don't even have buildings like they had in ancient Rome where they would still be standing. Our buildings would be collapsing.
Right.
They'd be net value of zero. Mm-hmm. And so therefore, if you get it, that shows you it only takes 25 years of depreciation to destroy the entire accumulated wealth of civilization.
I know. And these people think that the path to the future, now I'm back to Davos and the great reset and build back better, is, hey, let's destroy everything and then rebuild the world.
Oh, that gets back to the true believer. Did you?
Right.
God, you know who brought up the true believer in a podcast, which I haven't finished? Mark Andreessen waxed rather philosophically about the importance of the true believer. For those who weren't listening to the batshit crazy four, the Fantastic Four of Kunzel, Luongo, Kerrigan, and Collum. What it was, the True Believers, this book written in 1953 by Eric Hoffer, and for me it was completely mind-bendingly, it changed my worldview. I mean, it was fantastic, changed my worldview. Okay, so the message, by the way, is if we've got all this accumulated wealth, we're gonna goddamn either rot it or destroy it again.
Right.
Because that's all we do.
Because it takes so much work just to maintain that which we already have.
Status quo is very enthalpically demanding.
Yeah, it really is. And this is the points that made by people like Jordan Peterson and about, he's like, every day you get up and the lights are on. It's a goddamn miracle. Right.
So here's one for you. You're a chemist. I'm going to bore the shit out of your audience now, but you're going to like it. There is this sort of maxim in chemistry that says when you do a reaction of three particles, you invariably do first a bimolecular collision, and then you bring in the third particle. So a series of two bimolecular reactions, two particles colliding, then a third particle colliding, and that you almost never see all three come together at one time. And if you ask every PhD chemist on the planet why you don't do what are called termolecular reactions, three things colliding simultaneously, invariably their answer is something to do with order and probability. And I eventually say, so it's entropically problematic.
Yes.
And they go, yes. Now here's what you do. And I've done this to probably 200 chemists. I said, let's change the reference state of that. Let's start with a three atom or a 3-particle single molecule.
Right.
And blow it into 2 pieces.
Mm-hmm.
That gets you to the transition state of the second bimolecular reaction.
Yep.
You say, is that entropically favorable? And the answer is yes, 25 entropy units, crudely speaking. So everyone agrees that's entropically favorable. And then I go, if you took that same triatomic and you blew it into 3 particles, would that not be even more entropically favorable at the They go, yes. I go, therefore, the transition state of 3 loosely bound particles coming together is entropically favored relative to one with just 2. And absolutely everyone goes, shit. Right down to multiple Nobel Prize winners. And the guy who got it the fastest was one of my colleagues who actually has a Nobel Prize. And he right away says, that's a fascinating way of looking at that. We all get told you never bring 3 particles together simultaneously because of entropy. Right. And it turns out that termomolecular reactions are entropically favored. It's enthalpy. You can't afford 2 partial bonds simultaneously,
right?
Because that's lost enthalpy. So if you got A ... B ... C, that lost enthalpy of the partial bonding is the profound cost of a termomolecular transition. You want a whole covalent bond and then a partial bond,
right?
And I'm thinking, how the fuck did the entire chemistry world accept this thing and not question it? So there's one guy who got it right away. He nailed it. And it turned out it was the guy who taught me physical organic chemistry. A guy named Barry Carpenter. And I said, Barry, why does everyone say this? He says, I don't know. So I thought you'd like that as a chemist.
I do. I like that a lot, actually.
Right.
I like it a lot.
So that's another one of those uncomfortable questions where I sit there and go, okay, fuck, I don't know shit. So let's just ask and see what the hell happens. And you find the answers suck, and you go, I don't get it.
Right.
I don't get it. One of my students asked me where isotope effects come from, and I gave him this sock answer. And he said, I don't think so. And he dug into it, and he spent about a year in the library, and he ended up concluding that he came up with a whole new model of proton transfer, and he ended up giving a big talks on it and stuff, and it came out of a dumbass question where he asked his advisor and he didn't buy the answer. He thought, I don't know, that doesn't smell right to me.
Isn't that what science is supposed to be?
That is what science is supposed to be, and that's why this whole COVID story is a nightmare. By the way, science has been so damaged by COVID. Mm-hmm. I don't know how we recover. I
don't either. I agree. And it burns my tits like you would not believe to listen to fake scientists like Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Saying, wasn't that amazing when he got his ass kicked by who the hell was it? About a week ago. Yeah. Someone gave him shit. Was it Bill Maher?
I think somebody. I don't remember who it was, but it was somebody. Again,
and he kept talking about consensus, and he looked like such an asshole.
Well, because he is. And there's straight out of Central Casting, if you want my opinion. But when I only care about consensus, really. Science is consensus.
Kept saying that. He kept saying that over and over and over.
Like,
he says, I don't care what one scientist thinks. It's consensus, and I'm going.
The meme I saw was that I guess I got to go back and Copernicus. Like I got to go back and tell my friends that the sun revolves around the Earth,
and throw Da Vinci in the pond, and shit like that. By the way, if you haven't read Da Vinci's biography, I think Isaacson wrote it. Mm-hmm. One of the great stories, phenomenal. I did the audiobook, so I don't even have the pictures in front of me, but you know them all. You know them all. The guy with his arms out, and stuff like that. Da Vinci was so unbelievably ahead of his time. Mm-hmm. I have a question I like that. We're way off, but who the fuck cares?
Who cares? We did the Pentagon Papers.
I like to ask standard scientists what famous scientists reminds you of yourself. Now, of course, the answer is none because I'm not that good. But I said, but stylistically, are you a Copernicus? Are you a Newton? Are you what? What are you? And I have the answer for me.
The guy I most identify, just two. One is Heisenberg and the other is Boltzmann.
So I'm Einstein. The reason I'm Einstein is because I do everything with Gedanken experiments. So I do the field I'm in is kinetics.
Right.
And it's very mathematical. And I actually never took calculus. And I don't know math. And the math I know is I got in high school. And I tried to improve, but I didn't because they didn't give it to me here. And there's kind of an imprinting period. And if you don't get it, you're done.
Yeah.
And so what Einstein used to do is he really did create these mental constructs of a guy moving at the speed of light on a train, bouncing a ball.
Right.
Or running through a barn with a 2x4 that's 12 feet long and the barn's 10 feet wide, and having the thing be in the barn. And then he would say, okay, now I got to do the hard part. Let's put a formalism on this and backfill the math. Now I don't do the backfill part, but I do the Gedanken experiment part. I do the thing and say, okay, let's convert this to beets and fucking carrots.
Right.
Let's take it right down to the nuts and bolts. Did I ever tell you I found a mathematical flaw in the Roth IRA? No. Yeah, here I can give it to you now. And I think they changed the tax laws to take some of it away. But you Roth IRA guys who are listening to this, here's what I'll tell you. If you haven't thought about the difference between marginal and effective tax rate, you've missed the point. Now, I gave a talk in front of 500 money managers and said, if you see a problem with my thinking, I want you to tell me. And no one did. So here's the problem with the Roth versus the regular IRA. And this is, again, why the hell is a chemist doing this, right?
Right.
The Roth IRA, take the regular IRA. You put money pre-tax into the bank and it compounds at some rate. It's a very forward-looking thing because the government says, we're not going to take the money. We'll get ours later.
Right.
What governments do this? So when the Roth IRA first showed up, I said, oh, you pig fuckers, you are now groping for revenue. So my first instinct was one of real wretchedness because I said, you're groping for revenue. When did it appear? When Clinton was trying to balance the budget.
Yep.
Right on top of that. So he wanted the revenues. Now, so they said, you can even roll your regular IRA into a Roth IRA if you want, but you got to do it fast. This is, buy now or you're not going to get the sale price, right?
Yep.
So here's the problem. If you put money in a regular IRA, let's say you take 1,000, you put it in a regular, compounds tenfold, you take it out and you pay 20% tax, you've got 8,000. If you take a Roth IRA and you pay 20% sales tax up front, you now have 800, you put it in the Roth IRA, compounds tenfold, you've still got 8,000. So the only difference between a regular and a Roth is the tax rate.
Yes.
Now, here's the problem. When you decided to put the money in the Roth IRA, you took the highest slice of your income that year and you agreed to pay the taxes on it. You're up in the 39% bracket in many cases. When you pay the taxes on the regular IRA, it's coming out over the entire tax bracket. So the first one comes out at 0, and then it comes out in various increments. And so it turns out you can actually calculate. There's calculators that do this, that say if you're making 150K, here's your marginal rate, and it's here, and here's your effective rate, and it's down here. And it's about a 12% difference off. And I did the math and said, holy shit, my grad students would be sort of at the cusp. They would earn so little that when they took it out at the end, they might be okay.
Right.
And I started presenting this to people, and people first going, oh, that can't be. And then I had colleagues doing spreadsheets. Then I presented it to a money manager in my office who was there with one of his lawyer buddies. And the money manager wasn't getting it, but the lawyer was getting it. He says, Oh, I get it. I get it. So it's the marginal versus the effective tax rate. The Roth IRA, you're paying the marginal rate, the highest bracket, and the regular, you're paying the effective rate, the middle brackets. If you've never heard that in an analysis,
right,
then you've not been. Now you go to Fidelity or something. What do they say? They say, well, it depends on your circumstances. I go, that's your way of saying the Roth IRA is bullshit. Right. So then I asked one of my money managers, and he says, and he goes, we kind of instinctively knew it, but I hadn't put it together. I said, well, why do people market? He says, well, it's like selling Corvettes. You sell the red one. That's what people want. They want the red one. So then one of my colleagues says, he says, I found your analysis. I use this in the talk I gave. He says, I found your analysis. It's spot on. This is it. It was in Wikipedia. I'm going, holy shit, it's been out there the whole time. Now, there are other advantages to the Roth, but if you just trace $1,000, take it, pay the tax or don't pay the tax in the regular, it doesn't work well. Now, I've had people send me spreadsheets. You know why? Because they did the Roth, and they're desperately trying to find a reason why it's a good thing to do.
Right. So that's hilarious. My Roth IRA at this point is a pile of gold coins in the corner.
Yeah, I know.
It's not particularly difficult. But what's funny is, going back to the question about kind of what scientists do you identify with. I don't know. I brought up Boltzmann for a couple of reasons, and the one is because he was the guy who, Boltzmann's known for Boltzmann's constant. What he's really known for is the equation of absolute entropy,
right?
Which is what we're all fighting for. And he spent most of his life searching for
fighting against, right?
The thing he's fighting against. And when he finally did figure it out, which is S equals KLN omega, which for those of you who are not, who are not science junkies, that's S entropy is equal to S equals KLN omega, which is Boltzmann's constant times the natural log of the number of degrees of freedom in the system.
Right.
And I look and I say, and then when he did that, he put it on his tombstone because then he killed himself.
he went to maximum entropy almost overnight.
Well, it's just like, oh, fuck. It's like this great insight into, and it's not that I'm
I don't know anything about
suicidal or anything, but it's this idea that you search for one of these foundational things that alter the perception of reality itself, which is
right.
We all talk about entropy, and it's the same thing with Heisenberg and the uncertainty principle, which is very simple vector math and solving the Schrodinger equation for a helium atom.
Right.
And you come down to the and it's just vector math, dude. Dave, I know I'm sure you know this, but I mean, as an undergraduate,
don't forget, I don't know math.
Wait.
But I did take linear.
But you know algebra, right?
Okay.
So if you know Dirac notation, then you know quantum mechanics, because now I
got a D in quantum mechanics, graduate level quantum mechanics, no calculus, graduate level physics. Holy fuck.
Okay, so the first time I took PChem 2, which is physical chemistry, quantum mechanics, at the University of Florida, I took it as a summer course with taught the old style with triple integrals and integrating over Euclidean space and all of this stuff. And I had gotten a D+ in Calc 3, so I barely understood how to and so there we are. And then, but it wasn't required for me
Eric
to get a
Weinstein.
T. But here's the fun part: the year I went to UF in '86, it wasn't required; it was recommended Calc 3, so I didn't need to get a C. In '87, the guys coming in, they needed to get a C in Calc 3, so I didn't have to retake it because you graduated under the rules in which you entered as a freshman. But then I'm outing myself, because then when I went to take it the second time, the physical chemistry, I took it with the guy who wound up being my undergraduate research director, and he taught in Dirac notation against the will of the department. So he was that guy. So if there's any scientist that I identify with most, it's my undergraduate research advisor, Phil Brucat, because that guy was a complete freaking maverick. He just did what was necessary to teach the information, because he had such a passion for his work that he didn't care. He didn't give it. He gave the same tests to his graduate students that he gave to his undergraduates, and we did better. And we did better than the graduate students did, taking the same basic course. And and it's that kind of thing. So Heisenberg's uncertainty principle for me tells a fundamental truth about the universe, which is that perception and reality are two radically different things, and the ability and fixing anything in space makes it incredibly difficult to know anything else. And
here's the thing that drives
this is
me
the
nuts.
problem, right? It's like, what does Heisenberg's uncertainty principle tell us? It tells us that if you know the position of an electron, then you don't know its velocity. And if you know what its velocity
you can't pin it down.
You don't know where it is, right? And so you can't know both things. And that the whole world is this big, and if we don't know that about a fucking helium atom, we don't know shit about how the universe actually works.
And global warming.
This is the world I live in.
Chaos theory is another one that guides my thinking, even though I don't know any of the math, but the idea of a chaotic system seems so important to me.
Agreed.
And so for those who miss the global warming thing, they're trying to calculate the temperature of the Earth 100 years from now, and they can't solve a three-body problem. The three-body problem is considered, I think it's considered not solvable.
Right.
Is that correct, or is that they have?
Well, no, I'll say no. It's the two. It's well, effectively, you're talking about two electrons, right? Trying to understand the forces active on each electron individually. Well, you can't because they interact with each other, and if you know one, then you can't know the other. And
so that's the uncertainty principle. But the three-body problem is a son of a bitch problem, and they're trying to predict the temperature of the Earth. Now, I had a big discussion with Doomberg on this, and he says. When I get in this debate, I just say, look, it's a whole bunch of nonlinear equations. They're not solvable.
Right.
Period. But chaos theory is what tells me that the Twin Towers shouldn't have fallen the way they did. Chaos theory, they're just something should have tipped them off their game. They should, but the 86 floors that fell, something should have said, "Oh no, you're going over there," what was the other? That's what markets are. Markets are just chaos theory.
Absolutely.
And they're fine until they're not.
Yeah.
And I don't know when they're not going to be, but when they're not going to be, when they reach that chaotic moment, then all hell breaks loose.
Well, then when they reach it's what you going back to what you talked about earlier. I use the metaphor of the transition state in chemical analysis all the time to try and explain to people the barrier to the barrier itself. It depends on whether the barrier is low to dissolving sodium chloride in water, or it's really high, trying to reduce rust in the presence of aluminum in order to do thermite. But then once it happens, it's so powerful, the entropic the entropic reaction is so strong that you unleash enough energy that it melts the iron, which and then the whole thing is this big downhill you're downhill running, but
except I don't buy the melty iron. Oh, the thermite I buy the melting iron.
The thermite itself is its own reaction, but you have to either light it on fire with molten magnesium, or you have to douse it with 15 molar sodium hydroxide and let it sit for an hour while the heat builds.
What percentage of the population do you think believes that 9/11 is a fucked up narrative? What percentage do you think it is?
I'd say probably somewhere between 25 and 30%.
So if I said building 7, 25 or 30 would know what I was talking about.
Oh, I'm thinking about this 9/11 itself. Building 7, ooh, that's a much lower number. Because I don't think most people even know about building 7 is the issue.
I figure if you think 9/11 is a messed up story, you've discovered building 7.
Okay, fair enough. That's it. Whether that's a valid assumption or not, I don't know.
I don't know. So for those who are listening and going, what the hell are these two guys talking about now? What I will tell you is your homework. Oh, that was an evil laugh. Your homework assignment is to go watch what's a documentary called The New Pearl Harbor, which is the best. It's about 3 or 4 hour documentary on all the problems with all the narratives related to 9/11. And you get to the end and you go, when I'm sitting there watching a dozen aeronautical engineers saying the plane that flew at 270 and hit the Pentagon would have ripped to shreds at sea level doing 540 knots. No question that plane would not have survived that flight path. You go, okay, and then they put together a dozen jumbo jet pilots, and they all say there's no chance I could have flown that flight path. I do not have the skills to fly that flight path. And you go, okay, that's the problem. And then you get the building 7, and you get that. It just goes.
Yeah,
more bananas.
And I'll be honest with you. I don't. 9/11 to me is one of those things where I'm open to all interpretations. This is one of those things where I have a personal opinion as to what I think is going on or what went on, but the other part of me goes, you know what? You don't know anything, and you're not going to know anything because it's like it's
except for it seems to defy the laws of physics.
I agree. There are issues with that. I know I am under no illusions about there was no fucking plane that hit the Pentagon. That's, to me, that's I understood that on 9/11. Like I took one look at that and I went, oh, look, somebody staged the scene and that was a missile that hit the Pentagon.
Well, so for those who don't know what we're talking about there, here's the smoking gun for the Pentagon, besides the fact of the flight path ripping the plane apart and all that stuff. Imagine, put yourself back to 9/11. I was teaching a short course on kinetics at Procter & Gamble, and 9/11 happened. We all know where we were. I was teaching a short course. Try teaching a course on kinetics to a bunch of guys for the next 2 days who have computers in front of them, and they're watching 9/11 tapes, right?
Right.
And so it turns out that oh fuck, I lost my train of thought. I was going somewhere with this. And fuck, I don't have it.
Okay, I'll give you my 9/11 story. Ready?
Yeah, go.
So I was working at the University of Florida as a lab manager in soil and water science at the time, jockeying an AA, wrangling 14 visiting professors and graduate students and everything else. And sitting there at my desk reading Lou Rockwell, nursing a cup of coffee at about 8:45 because I'm a good state employee. I'm not working in it, and I've been on the clock for 45 minutes. And one of the other lab managers comes in and goes, "See, you want to see something cool? Planes just fell into, just turn on CNN. Planes just ran into the World Trade Center." And I went, "You guys can't see me, but I'll like drop in my head." And I'm like, oh.
And it at first the thought is, oh, some propeller plane, right? So, right.
No, I knew, because the way he said it, I knew that it was bigger than that. And I refused to watch the video until later that day. My wife and I were in the process of buying a car, and we got sent home from the university about noon. They said send everybody home, and she and I went out car shopping that night. So because there was nobody there, like, cool, we can go drive cars, and it won't be a problem.
I know they're all
and we'll get our and we'll just take our minds off of this. And I'm in the Nissan dealership in Gainesville, waiting for them to unload this car from the showroom for me to drive. And I finally see it for the first time. And I turned to the salesman while they're, trying to get the car ready for us. And I went, I really wouldn't be surprised if our government did this.
And he was shocked.
And he looked at me and went, yeah. I could tell I had horrified him, but he really wanted a sale. So
yeah. Here's the problem with the Pentagon story. The Pentagon knew the plane was coming there somewhere into DC for 45 minutes, right? That plane lumbered its way down to DC. Right. We watch it. They emptied the Capitol building of people. They evacuated critical buildings, stuff like that. The plane shows up, hits the Pentagon, supposedly. And from what must be at least 100,000 security cameras and a truly countless number of handheld VHS recorders of people visiting Washington, D.C. on field trips and shit, they get one shitty frame of the plane hitting the Pentagon. One frame that shows nothing. One frame. That plane would have been seen from 7,000 different angles. There would have been scenes from a mile away, the thing lumbering its way into D.C., the explosion, nothing. That's almost as compelling as Building 7. So the new Pearl Harbor, for those who have not seen it, it is well worth the effort. I think that's the one where the Scientific American debunkers, their story gets told, and they're comically stupid. They're beyond comprehension. They model the building falling, and it shows this cartoon of it just kind of just crumbling, and you go, "Oh, that was a good model. That was stupendous." And so I first got on it, though I didn't know anything about. I didn't pay any attention to this part of the story until a couple of years later, when a physicist friend of mine sent me the Building 7 collapse and said, "You got to watch this." And I watched it and I said, "Holy shit, there is no way that defies the laws of physics in every imaginable respect, the way 7 came down." Mm-hmm. And I think 7 was wired to be brought down like an embassy, mm-hmm. because it had all the spook shit and all the corporate fraud shit. And I think it was built to be brought down.
I think also wasn't DTCC's records down at the bottom of Building 7?
Everything. There was gold down in the basement. There was all sorts of shit. So then the problem becomes, once you go down one of these rabbit holes.
Yep. And
the guys I'm most sympathetic of right now are the doctors and virologists of the world.
Yep.
Who were merely going along thinking that the FDA were good guys and that we were just trying to fight disease and shit. And all of a sudden, COVID hits, and all of a sudden they realize that the entire health establishment is criminal, crooked, part of rising authoritarianism, mm-hmm. part of the New World Order. And if you, I'm in a doctor Zoom group where they've all gone through. I drilled, Scott Atlas for 15 minutes with questions. Ryan Cole I spoke with for 2 hours. Every last one of the guys who are the prominent anti-vaxxers, anti-lockdowns, anti-remdesivirs, pro-ivermectins, have not just concluded that that story's wrong. They are complete New World Order guys now.
Yep.
And I can't imagine. So I once asked Aaron, I think I mentioned this in our last podcast, where if I did, I mentioned, maybe not, Aaron Cariotti. I'm going to mention him, and I'm going to say what he told me, because in payment for what I'm about to do, he wrote a book. I can't remember the title, but Cariotti, Kheriaty. I read it about 3 months ago. Now, I am up to my ass, up to my nose in COVID shit. I've written 200 pages on it. I don't need to see any more. I know that the vaccine killed a lot of people. I know all sorts of stuff like this. And I'm positive. I'm a little uncomfortable with the numbers. I don't know if the official numbers out of Australia showing an 80% drop in fertility are real. I know they're the official numbers, but I'm sitting there going, that's a shitload. I mean, that's a big number. So I get lost in the how big a problem is each of these, but I have no doubt that this whole COVID story is a complete mess. But I asked Aaron, I said, Aaron in his book, even though I read it long after I started giving up thinking about it, it was a great book. Mm-hmm. And so I urge people who have not read about COVID to read Carioty's book, because it goes into the authoritarianism and stuff. And he's just a fucking doctor who ran the COVID program. And I think it was UC Irvine Medical School.
Right.
And then he started to know things were wrong. I said, were you predisposed to going down these rabbit holes because you hit every one, or was this a shock? And he said, well, I knew things were wrong with the system. He said, but it was an unbelievable shock. And it shocked the shit out of Bhattacharya, who's a gentleman of gentlemen and a brilliant health policy guy. And he basically came out and said, what good is my entire career if I can't speak out against this shit at this point?
Right.
And so those of you who think the COVID story is an honest assessment and an honest attempt to deal with a serious problem, you've missed the boat. Yeah. You have completely missed the boat. No. Then you go down one of these rabbit holes, there are no guardrails left now.
No.
So you look at the war. So it was no problem looking at the war in Ukraine and going, okay, this is bullshit. Yep. This is bullshit. I spotted it when it looked like Russia wasn't trying to actually kill anybody. Mm-hmm. Right away, I said, Russia's not trying to kill anyone. They're not destroying infrastructure. They're attempting to sort of weave their way through Ukraine without hurting Ukrainians. And I kept saying to my wife, this is not a war. This is not Saving Private Ryan here. Right. This is not Baghdad Day One.
Right.
And so I took Putin's side and I looked at it from this other lens, found about 40 guys and wrote about 50 pages on why. And you've written just so much. These are all these gigantic rabbits. You will never be able to look at the world again through a normal lens.
No, you can't. Once you see stuff like this, you can't unsee it. And the biggest problem, and this is going right back to what we were discussing at the beginning of this, I think it was probably a good place to try and wrap this up. Not that I don't love talking to you, Dave, but at a certain point, it's like, we've been going for an hour and a half, which is
I know,
which is the
talking
thing.
Talking about Boltzmann. How to ruin a podcast, right?
Oh, dude, get me talking about Boltzmann and Heisenberg, and it's like, no, we're just getting started. But I think once you see it, you can't unsee it, and then the problem then becomes that itself becomes its own self-reinforcing problem. And again, like when you go back to what I was said earlier, I was thinking about this when I started putting the article together this morning to talk about this, which is that once you have a heuristic, if you're not willing to look at that heuristic in the context of the other heuristics about the quality of the information that's coming your way and the full court press, the zone blitz of disinformation that's coming at you and the multiple ways they're blitzing you, that's when methodological errors and methodological mistakes of cynicism overwhelm your ability to find signal from noise.
I've noticed that in several people. I actually believe, and I mentioned this in one of our old Ball Guys podcasts, that so you know more about this shit than I do by at least an order of magnitude, if not two. What I mentioned to you in one of the podcasts, I said the risk is that you have this structure that is so rock solid that you can hang any fact off it and it won't tip it over.
Right.
That's the great risk. Is that and I can do that too. So if you tell me something about one of these things I've been studying, I'll go, yeah, well, that's just this, or even worse, you go, I just don't believe it actually. Right. Now, that's a rational answer. People tell me shit, and I go, I don't think it's true. Trump insulted the World War I veterans. I go, I don't believe it. That's not what he does. He heaps lavish praise on people. He doesn't insult people like that. No. And so you just dismiss it, and then you become kind of an idiot if you're not careful. Yes. The other guy who I saw change, I thought spectacularly during the COVID story was Chris Martenson. Mm-hmm. Who I've known for 20 years. Chris started out dark about how bad this virus was, the honey badger virus. Remember, mm-hmm. He named it the honey badger virus. And within about 3 months, I watched him. I'm going, he's changed his tune here. He's mm-hmm. now not talking about the lethality of the virus. He's talking about the fucked up people who were running this operation. Mm-hmm. And I've done tons of podcasts with him. And I'm impressed that he was able to rearrange his thinking.
Good. Now get him off peak oil. Now get him off peak oil.
I still have a peak oil slant in me.
I don't.
Well,
I just refuse to be Malthusian about anything. That's my problem.
No, that may be. Well, you punk ass bitch. The reason I have a peak oil slant in me because I think if you're drilling 2 miles below the Gulf, the oil's getting harder to get to.
I get that, but I come at the peak oil story the same way I come at climate change, the same way I come at almost everything, which is that just because one aspect of the process is you've identified a problem, and then you take a short run problem, you take a short run problem, over. Yeah. and then you analyze, and then you extend that out using Excel 16 time periods and go, look, it's catastrophe. And we have global warming, we have peak oil, we have this, we have that. It doesn't allow for humans to respond to innovation and to
Resourcefulness,
incentives to change things. So like I know enough about, and then the peak oil guys will always come back and go, well, if you say, well, what about pulse plasma technology to go regenerate all well? That'll buy us another 5 years. I'm like, really? That was 50% of the oil from the old wells. It's like the gold guys told us ages ago there isn't enough gold in the world.
Well, that's never been true. But that's never been true.
Of course, it's never been true. But
but there is no amount of gold needed.
No, what I mean is there's.
I got it.
But it's the same problem when the mine is played out. I mean, what are the only silver mines I tell people to invest in? The ones that go and rehabilitate the old historic silver mines because they've already been. All the exploration work's already been done. All you got to do is pick the shit up off the ground.
I know.
So. It's the same kind of thing with oil. We've mined all the cheap stuff, but that doesn't mean that that there's still not a lot of cheap stuff out there.
Right.
And then when you normalize the price of oil for the CPI over the last 50 years, what has it gone up? 15% I'm literally supposed to change my entire lifestyle over a 15% price rise over the course of my fucking lifetime.
I agree with all that. But the way I get past the peak oil story is I say, we're going nuclear.
Of course.
And so the apocalyptic peak oil story doesn't make sense to me because we will go nuclear. And by the way, the minute we can't heat our houses, people will beg for nuclear. In fact, in 2021, I wrote that we would have an engineered oil crisis so that people would beg for nuclear. And all of a sudden, 2022 shows up.
Here we are in 2022.
Holy fuck.
And I'm saying the same.
And by the way, you know what I read this morning? And it blew my circuits. The Poles and another country are refusing to buy Ukrainian wheat because they're flooding the market with it. I'm going, yes. Were we supposed to starve to death?
Right.
Were we all supposed to starve to death? Right. So I totally get that. But what is also true though is I think that we do have to transition to nukes. And if people get in the way of it, there could be some pain along the way.
Well, it's funny, Dave. We talk about this. I almost hate to say that I brought this up because I brought this up previously. I just did a market report last week because somebody asked me about peak oil and all of this stuff, and I did a whole rant on this on my Sunday market report for my patrons. And I went through. I used the transition state as a metaphor for like, look, when it's hard to shift over from one product to the next, like when you're substituting Lee's for Levi's, right? That's like dissolving sodium chloride in water. The energy barrier to dissolve sodium chloride in water is almost nothing. But when you're trying to shift over from one energy source to another, and you've got all this inertia, you've got all of this
infrastructure,
capital and infrastructure and all this stuff, the changeover is going to be slow. And if you interfere with the process of rationally pricing these two objects,
that's the problem.
Relative to each other, then it will look like a crisis the day that we turn around and go, yeah, we're running out of oil.
So here's the crisis I see coming, though.
So, that's not the crisis I see coming is that, the Russians are going to continue to let me just finish. The Russians are going to continue to pump a shitload of oil. And so are we, because there's plenty of oil underneath the friggin' Bakken. There's so much oil out there yet that it's not even an issue. The crisis is going to be in the faith of the institutions who have lied to us for the last 30 years about global fucking warming.
The other thing is they're trying to legislate us into electric vehicles.
Right.
And they could fuck us up badly doing that.
They are.
And therefore there could be a period of great pain while we go, wait a minute, explain to me again why I didn't put natural gas into my house as a heating source.
Right. Ask me what the goal of that is. And I'll tell you clearly the goal is to take away the right of people to have individual transportation.
Right.
That's what this is about.
Right.
This is not about, it has nothing to do with oil or EVs, because EVs are energy destructive in every
and they also view the digital world as the win for the new world order, no matter how you cut it. Any angle you look at the digital world. When I think the day the internet went live was potentially the day we lost all our civil liberties in the long run.
No.
Now that could be a Malthusian model, though. You can say, no, we'll fix that too. But I'm not that optimistic.
I'm just a big fan of like a single variable analysis is a very dangerous thing because we all live in a very complex dynamic system where there are multiple variables controlling everything. And you get into a situation where you can have correlation, but correlation doesn't mean anything. And
now the latest, which goes from A to F, the biggest span I've ever seen, are the people who say that AI is going to be phenomenal, and the people who say we will not survive. What an amazing range of opinion on that one. All the way from phenomenal.
When we get done, Dave, just so you know, I was already thinking about this when we were having this discussion like 5 minutes ago. As a courtesy for regularly coming on my show and hanging out with me and entertaining me, I'm going to send you a copy gratis of the latest issue of our newsletter because we have an article in there about AI. I think that will just absolutely blow your freaking mind. But it hasn't come out yet. It comes out in about 12 hours or so, folks. So that's
you got to send it to me.
I will.
You got to send it to me.
All right.
And the AI story, it's fascinating, the range of opinion on AI. But it reminds me, Jeremy Rifkin moved on to the next crisis. He didn't hang out long at the molecular biology is going to destroy the Earth story. Now, I still think it could. There's no question that the barracks and the Days-Ex of the world could just kill us all.
Sure.
But Jeremy had it wrong, and he was a fear-mongering apocalyptic grifter, and the only thing that makes me not a grifter is I don't make any money.
I get this is what I do for a living now because
it actually does take the pressure off because then I just don't have to, if I was running a Bitcoin podcast, I can't let down my guard on Bitcoin, right? I've got to, even if the world's changing, I go, oh, but it's my community. I got 1 million Bitcoin followers and I got to stay on message, right? I got to stay on target. I don't have to stay on target. No. Because the only thing I got to do is not get fired in the next 3 years. And if I get fired in the next 3 years, I just retire anyways.
Right.
And I go down in a ball of flames. It'll be spectacular.
It'll be spectacular.
They try to fire me.
As long as I haven't been remanded to Guantanamo, Dave, you're always welcome on my podcast.
I am going to strap the explosives on my chest, metaphorically, and I wouldn't go down quietly.
It is funny. One of the things that I will just, and this is the last thing I'll say is that doing this for a living is both, if you do it from a particular perspective, which is that, well, that you're going to say something that's going to piss off 10% of your people. If you're doing it right on a regular basis, you'll piss off your 10% most expensive customers on a regular basis. And that's just the way you have to be. And if you do it that way, you'll just generate, you'll generate enough loyalty and cachet with people that, they'll forgive you your sins and whatever they happen to be.
So we're going to have a shakeout of bloggers and podcasters where it seems to me that it seems like an awful lot of people paying their bills off this process. Is there going to be some scrubathon where you say, okay, the good ones survive and the bad ones go to hell in a handbasket?
Don't get me started about Substack.
Okay.
I happen to think Substack is the next Parler, is the next whatever. It's the next echo chamber that then they're going to scrub. They're going to push everybody onto a Substack, and then they're going to scrub them all. That's what I think is coming, which is why we never moved over there. Or
so you therefore see sinister aggregation of people at Substack. Then
what I see is I see they've done this many times. They get you all in one place, then they push us on Twitter and then turn it into an anti-free speech space. Everybody, conservatives get pissed off. They go run over to this thing, Gab, Parler, this, that, or whatever.
Right.
And then
Rumble.
Oh look, and then look, you're all in one place, and now we can kill you.
Right.
And so I've seen this too many times.
I've seen the digital world.
I've seen this too many times, and like the best thing to do is to build something that's anti-fragile, and and always have a hot spare ready to go.
Okay. Well, look, it was fun. It was fun. No one could say we didn't cover enough topics. And if you know anyone who can get me on Rogan, I know say vice versa. It's the big score.
There's a number of them that are a big score, but I mean, in general, this is not even about. I do this because I can't do anything else, and now that I've been doing this for this long, I now really literally can't do anything else.
Yeah, exactly. You've ossified.
Imagine me trying to go back and get a job as a chemist today, and somebody looking at my HR and some HR weenie doing the
I lost social media check when I got canceled for actually calling it what turned to be more truthful than I even thought.
Right.
And it wasn't even political. It wasn't even an offensive statement that I made, but I still got canceled. God damn, I lost my time. I'm a fucking demented old man. I just lose my thought. In any event, you should just let me go before I fumble even more shit.
All right. Well, Dave Collum, as always, a great pleasure to sit and chat.
Send me an email when you put it out, because I'll forget we did it, and then I'll find it months from now and go, I forgot about Luongo talk. So
no worry.
Send me an email.
You'll get it. You'll get it. All right. Okay. You be well, Dave, and you have a great afternoon.
Adios.
Well, that'll about wrap it up for episode 139 of the Gold, Goats, and Guns podcast. I want to thank Dave for a rousing discussion about a great many things. It's always fun to dig into the weeds of some of the areas of, knowledge or expertise or whatever it is that we do that we don't normally do around here. It's always just fun to have a wide-ranging discussion after sometimes getting a little too technical or a little too geeky. So it is quite cool. As always, you can follow my work over at my blog at tomluongo.me. You can follow me on Twitter at TFL1728. And you can sign up for the Gold, Goats, and Guns Patreon at Patreon/Gold, Goats, and Guns to support the work that myself and Dexter White do in publishing the monthly newsletter and the bi-weekly market reports and keeping our thumb on the scale of the zeitgeist. You guys be well. You take care. We'll talk soon. Keep your stick on, guys.